Good morning, geographers. Today's video is going to be about climate graphs and how we can interpret climate graphs. So I'm going to walk through all the different features, such as degrees, precipitation, how to interpret this information, and then we'll look at some important formulas you need to know, like temperature range and average temperature, and how we might use the climate graph to get that information. So first off, if we look at this graph, we can see that there's actually two sets of data going on. We're being told two things. On the left side, we're being told about temperature, so whether it's in degrees Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius. We've got the temperature from 0 going all the way up to 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Obviously, other graphs might go higher than those temperatures, depending on where we are. And then if we look at the on the right side here, we can see we've got millimeters, which is our precipitation, all the way from 0 millimeters all the way up to 150 millimeters. Again, that number might be higher in other graphs, depending on where we're looking. And we can also see that this town or city that we're looking at here has an altitude of 1,757 meters above sea level, meaning it's that many meters above the sea level. So this place is obviously quite high. Okay, so let's have a look here. So we can see we've got these bar graphs and we've also got a line graph. So the line graph actually has to do with the temperature. Okay, so we can see this side, the temperature's in red, and this line graph is in red. So red is temperature, and then we've got the bar graphs in blue, as well as the numbers here for precipitation in blue, showing us that the precipitation is the bar graphs. Now, in your test or on a different graph, it's not always going to be color-coded. So what you need to remember and write down in your notes, that the line graph is always going to be about the temperature, and the bar graphs will always have to do with the precipitation, so the rainfall this place gets. Okay, so for those learners who live in South Africa, this graph might look familiar, or at least the contents of it will feel familiar, because this is of Johannesburg. Okay, Johannesburg is 1,750 meters above sea level, so this is Johannesburg, South Africa. And if we now start to interpret this graph, we can see that there's a big dip in the middle here. And what's going on in the numbers 5, 6, 7, and even 8? Well, these are the months, right? So if we look here, number 1 would mean it's January, 2, Feb, 3, March, 4, April, and onwards. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. So we can see then that it is, the temperature starts dipping in April, again even more in May, hits June, and then even July is the coldest, rises a little bit in August, further in September, and we're back up to nice hot summer in November, December. We also can see that we don't get much rainfall in these winter months. So this would be where you might get some questions in an exam saying, using the climate graph, which month gets the most rainfall in Johannesburg? Okay, so if it's rainfall, it means we're having to look at the bar graphs. This one over here looks pretty high, January. And we can take out our ruler and we take it to the top and we measure all the way across. And we can see there's actually one more month that's actually higher than January. It's December. So we can see then that it's going there. So it looks like it's getting about 140 millimeters a month, maybe more. So December then is our wettest month. The question might also say, which month in Johannesburg is the coldest month? Well, then we're going back to look at the line graph, and we can see that it's over here, our two coldest months. And we can take our ruler, and we can see that if we measure it with June here, that July is actually a bit colder. So we can measure it, and we put our ruler there, and we take And we look at the axis and we go across and we can see it's getting just below 10, maybe 9 degrees. So the average temperature in July is actually 9 degrees. And we can then say, well, which is the hottest month? We take it up and we can see that Jan and December, so January here and December here, are both very similar in their temperature, and the average temperature is just below 20, meaning it's 19 degrees at average. Okay, and we can even get more creative in the types of questions we ask you. We can say if you're packing your bag for a holiday and you're going to Joburg for a holiday, I know, very boring holiday, no beaches here, but we'll say, do you need to pack a swimming costume if you're going to Johannesburg in August? Well, we look here in August, we can measure up, and we can see, well, no, the average temperature is about 14 degrees, 13 degrees maybe. It's going to be very cold. But I'll say, okay, well, you're going to Johannesburg for holiday in February. Should you take a raincoat? Yes, we can see that February is one of the wet months because the bar graph is up all the way to about 119 or 110 millimeters a month of rain. Okay, so we really can get a lot of data, a lot of information from climate graphs. And then if we go down, we can even ask more questions. We can ask you, what is the temperature range? So the formula for temperature range is you're going to take your high minus it by your low, meaning your high temperature minus your low temperature. So if we ask you, what is the highest temperature in Joburg? Well, we've already worked that out when we were looking at Jan and December. And we said the high is about 19 degrees. Because we can see when we take our ruler up against the top of the line graph, it's just below 20. So we'll say 19. So we say here, high minus low, which is the same as 19 degrees minus, or what's our low? We take it to July, and we can see it's about 9 degrees. So then we write that in 19 minus 9 degrees, which means our temperature range of Johannesburg is 10 degrees Celsius. We've taken the high and we've minused the low. That's quite a high temperature range, and that's because Joburg is so far inland. It's far from the ocean, and the ocean's able to regulate temperature. That's bringing up the section you learnt about climate and climate regions and different factors that influence climate. Okay, so now we're going to look at temperature range. But before we move on, just remember you must always make your notes, and you can even highlight here that high minus low. This is temperature range. Okay. Now if we're going to look at average temperature, what we do there is we take our we take the different things that we're plussing together and we divide it by 2. So usually what we'll do there is we'll take our high plus low and divide it by 2, meaning that there it's going to be 19 degrees plus 9 degrees divided by 2, which is the same as 28 degrees divided by 2, which equals 14 degrees Celsius. And that's how we do that one. And again, we write it down in our notes that average temperature is you take the high plus the low and divide it by 2. That's our notes there. We can also ask it in a different way. We can say, what's the average temperature of the, so we say summer months. So we could say, well, it's December, January, February, March. So we just take the temperature of those 4 months divided by 4, because that's how many months we're dealing with, and that's the average. Okay, I hope this helped. I've kept it short, just as a nice brief overview. But there we have it.